In this very well packaged parcel is an interesting device from Bigme and a silicone case for it. The device is an Android smartphone with a color e-ink screen. A black and white version is also available, but I chose the color one. And actually I have wanted to try a smartphone with an e-ink screen for quite a while now. A very long time ago, there was a brand Yota phone from Russia, and they had a couple models of dual-screen smartphones. One of the screens on the front of the device was your normal color TFT screen. However, on the back of the device, there was a second e-ink screen. Unfortunately, even though it was a very interesting device, they failed to gain support from independent developers, and also they failed to gain much interest from the consumers, and that's why they stopped producing the phones and sold the brand to China, where the manufacturing of the devices was already taking place. There were no e-ink phones for quite a while, and then a brand named Hisense appeared on the market with a smartphone which looks very similar to this one. However, this one, Hibreak from Bigme, has a better screen than the Hisense model. Hisense also ceased production of e-ink smartphones, making Bigme one of the few, if not the only brand, that offers such smartphones. Before we proceed with the review, I just want to point out that normally on a smartphone you will have that film on the screen that contains some highlights about the device, the processor used, the amount of RAM, the cameras, and so on. Since this is an e-ink screen, you don't need to print the label, and this information is actually stored as a picture on the phone's storage, and as e-ink screen can display a picture without consuming power. I think the idea was to actually use this picture to showcase the capabilities of this device. Anyway, talking about screen protectors. E-ink screens are much more fragile than your normal TFT or OLED panels, and that is why it is highly recommended to use a screen protector on e-ink. And Bigme has one already installed at the factory, so you only need to peel the transportation film and you're ready to go. And also, as I already mentioned, there is also a silicone case. It's a good quality silicone case. My only concern is the color. Normally you either have a black one or a transparent one, and this one is a milky white color which is in stark contrast with the black case of the phone itself. The packaging is also very basic. The only thing you have is an instruction booklet and a tool to extract the SIM slot. And that's it. They haven't included even a USB Type-C cable for charging and data transfer. Not a big deal, but still it's a little bit odd. The SIM card extractor tool is used to extract the SIM card tray, and even though the tray looks like it can fit 2 SIM cards, in reality it cannot. You can only fit 1 SIM card and optionally an SD card for storage. You cannot fit 2 SIM cards, so this smartphone is not dual SIM. However, Bigme is planning an update on this device. So this one is just called Hibreak. However, they are going to release Hibreak Pro, and one of the features will be dual SIM support. I'm really looking forward to it, since for me personally, dual SIM is a deal breaker. The smartphone itself has a little bit dated design with this fake leather style plastic back cover. It is also very light, and it's not too big. It's a little bit larger than iPhone 14, for example, but the dimensions are similar. There is a front camera and a back main camera, a USB Type-C slot, and there is no audio jack. This smartphone does not support analog audio, so if you want to use wired headphones with this thing, you will need digital USB Type-C headphones or a digital USB Type-C to analog 3.5mm adapter. The analog adapters and analog Type-C headphones will not work. And of course you can use Bluetooth, which is what most people will be probably using. There is nothing on the top edge, on the left-hand side from the screen, you have an additional button which you can assign different actions in the settings menu. And on the right-hand side, you have the traditional power button and the volume rocker. And this phone doesn't have a fingerprint scanner. The big issue for me is the location of those buttons. Normally, on an Android smartphone, the volume rocker will be on the top and the power button will be in the middle. Here it's vice versa. So the volume rocker is in the middle and the power button is at the top. And that drives me insane because I'm so used to use the middle button to unlock the device and I'm constantly decreasing volume instead of turning the device off. So yeah, this is a very strange design choice. You can probably get used to it if it's your only phone. However, if you have other phones, and you have to have other phones since this is an E-Ink phone, you will struggle to remember that this device has power button in a different location. When you turn the device for the first time or after a factory reset, you will be greeted by a settings wizard where you have to choose the language of the device, and after that there will be several prompts where you're asked to create an account or log in into existing Bigme account, which you don't have to. You can skip all those steps and the device will work perfectly fine without any additional accounts. The setup wizard also shows you a brief instruction how to use the device, and there wasn't any bit of color visible on the screen while I was doing this. And I even became a little bit worried that even though I paid for a colored version, they mixed something up and actually shipped me a black and white version. But no, as soon as I finally got into the interface, I could see that the icons are actually colored. Before we go into the interface bit, it's high time to talk about the screen. This particular model uses Kaleido Plus or Kaleido version 2 type of color E-Ink screen. To better understand what that means, you need to first understand the difference between a traditional TFT or OLED screen and an E-Ink one. In a traditional color LCD screen, each pixel, which is an individual dot that makes up the image on the screen, consists of several subpixels, usually RGB. And by modulating the brightness of those subpixels, we can mix different colors to be displayed on the screen. An E-Ink screen works completely different. It is more of a mechanical than electronic device. E-Ink screen has some sort of very thick liquid between two planes of plastic. Some of the screens also have a glass panel on top of the plastic, however Kaleido version 2 doesn't have glass. And those two planes of plastic have electrodes in them that make a grid. And there is a difference in electric potential between those two planes. The one on top of the screen, which is closer to you, has always the potential of 0. However, the lower plane of plastic can have a potential from either plus 15 volts up to minus 15 volts. And between those two planes of plastic, in that thick liquid, there are small vials with pigment. In a black and white screen, the vials are black and white. One color is positively charged and the other is negatively charged. And when the electrodes in the lower pane of plastic have a negative charge, the positively charged vials will attract to it, while the negatively charged vials will bounce off it, and vice versa. When the electrodes beneath the screen have a positive charge, the negatively charged vials will attract to it, and the positively charged vials will bounce off it, rising to the top surface where you can see them. And here comes another crucial difference between E-Ink and most TFT panels. TFT panels have a backlight, or in case of OLED, the dots themselves shine a light. And that is the light that reaches your eyes and you see the picture and the colors and everything. E-Ink screens do not have a backlight. They may have a front light, but not a backlight. And they rely on the light coming onto them, which is reflected from those vials with colored pigment inside, back into your eye, and that's what forms the image. So when a vial with a white pigment is close to the top of the screen, you see this dot as white or as paper color, and when a black vial is at the top of the screen, you see it as a black dot or as ink on paper. That's why it is called e-ink, electronic ink or electronic paper. And another peculiarity with e-ink screens is the moment you stop applying the electrical charge, the vials stop moving in the liquid. That means that you can apply, for example, positive charge, which will move the negatively charged pigments up to the top of the screen and attract the positively charged particles back from the top of the screen. And by turning off the electricity just at the right time, you can make those particles stop somewhere in the middle, thus mixing black and white pigment and forming grayscale. So that is how black and white e-ink screens can also represent shades of gray. But this is black and white screens. The most advanced technology nowadays adds more vials with different pigments into the mix and a very sophisticated controller of the electric field, which makes it possible to display about 50,000 colors on an e-ink screen, which is still way less than even the worst TFT panel out there, but it's much better than the other option. The problem with this multi-pigment approach is that it is very expensive and it is also very slow. So it is not really usable in high-speed applications, for example, web browsing. It's more for a static picture. But this is the latest technology. But there is also an earlier technology, and Kaleido V2 is one of the previous ones. The pigments are still black and white, however, there is an RGB filter applied on top of the screen. The crucial difference is these are not subpixels. There is a pattern of RGB filters, and that means that a pixel can only show one color or shade of that color. So basically, one pixel will only show green, and the pixel next to it will only show red. They used to apply this filter onto the top glass coating, however those screens were very dim, and then they removed this glass plane and applied the filter directly onto the top plastic layer, making it as close to the pigments as possible, and that greatly improved the brightness of the image. And I had to tell you all of that just to show the screenshot. The device reports that it has a 1440 by 720 pixel screen, which is not Full HD, and it's a shame not to have Full HD on a 5.8 inch screen, but it gets trickier than that. As I just explained, not every pixel on the screen is capable to display each color. So those pixels altogether can display some color, but each individual pixel cannot display all the colors. So it makes it even more difficult to tell the real resolution of this device. But nevertheless, the resolution is more than enough for this particular device and its particular use cases. Okay, let's move on. Other specs. The battery is 3300 milliamps, and in my particular use case, which I will explain in a bit, it lasts me about 3 days on a single charge. And you can only use wired charging. Wireless charging is not supported. Main camera is 13 megapixels, and it makes okay pictures. I cannot complain. Of course, there is no AI processing going on, but still the pictures are decent enough. I'm actually surprised by how good the camera is. It also has all the necessary sensors, no problem with that. It does support GPS. For some reason, the manufacturer attracts attention to the fact that this device supports navigation, which is a little bit weird. Memory, you have 6 gigs of RAM and 128 storage, 104 of which is available to the user. You can also expand it with a memory card, for which you will need to install a microSD card up to 1 terabyte. The chipset used is MediaTek Helio P35, which is an 8-core entry-level chipset, and I would say it is a very entry-level chipset, which managed to get a little bit over 120,000 points in Antutu. It would be a big problem if you could actually game on an e-ink screen. However, since these type of applications, 3D games, are not even considered to be launched on this type of device, for everything else, for your everyday tasks, the performance is barely enough. It is usable, but it could do with much more performance to be more responsive. The touchscreen only supports 2 simultaneous presses, which seems to be the norm with e-ink screens. For example, I also have an e-book, which is basically a small Android tablet, also from Bigme, and that one can also recognize only 2 simultaneous presses. By the way, as I have my Bigme tablet out, the Bigme ebook does support the use of a special stylus, which has a battery inside and several buttons, so you can do different things with those buttons. The Bigme Hibreak phone does not support that type of stylus. It doesn't recognize it at all. You can only use your normal capacitive stylus, which are very cheap and readily available if you want. Another thing that many potential buyers will be interested in, especially if you come from a Hisense device, is will you have any problems with network connectivity? So this is a 4G phone. I tried different SIM cards from different carriers in different countries, and all of them work just fine. I had no trouble connecting to the mobile internet, I had no trouble receiving text messages, and I have no trouble receiving normal voice calls. So the answer is yes. This is a global version which should work with different carriers internationally. At least it does for me. Now a few words about the interface. This is an Android phone running Android 11, which is a little bit outdated, but still will be supported by Google for quite a while. It has Google Apps built in. You will not have any trouble connecting to Play Store and downloading apps from Play Store. You can also sideload the apps, and this is enabled by default. You don't have to go to security to enable anything. I also did the Google Play integrity check, and at first it didn't pass any of them. However, after a week of use, there was a software update which improved compatibility with banking apps, so I decided to recheck Play integrity, and now the device passes at least a basic security check. I'm not really sure why this is, since most Play Store apps do not check for that, and this phone doesn't have NFC. So you will not be using it for contactless payments anyway, so that is not such a big deal. Another annoying thing that the update fixed is the navigation buttons. I'm an old school Android user and I prefer navigation buttons over gestures, and I prefer the back button to be on the right side. However, initially the only option was with the back button on the left side. However, after the update, this option is also available now. The Android is more or less stock, however, there are some extra apps bundled which could be easily removed. For example, WPS Office, if you don't need it, you can easily remove it. There are also some Bigme specific apps, for example the AI function, Big GPT, whatever. I personally think that currently the neural networks are more of a hype than anything practical, and especially some no-name things like Bigme GPT. If I want to use a ChatGPT, I will go to OpenAI ChatGPT. But nevertheless, the functionality is here. It may be useful when you are reading books, for example, or something like that. The interface is a custom launcher designed specifically to look good, and I personally enjoy the look. It reminds me of my very first PDA, which I had in the early 2000s, and that was Palm 3E, which had a black and white TFT screen, and it was running Palmos. So this interface reminds me of that device, and I really enjoyed using that device, so I like this one as well. The original Android launcher is probably somewhere here as well, since you can access some of the additional settings through the settings menu, and it will open your standard Android settings in the standard Android interface. The launcher also has a floating ball, and when you tap it, it opens a menu with different controls. The same thing was on Bigme ebook, which I reviewed in one of the previous videos. I don't find this floating ball convenient, and it could be disabled in the settings. And also some settings have a different name. For example, child mode is called teen mode, where you can set up parental controls. There are some bugs or annoyances. For example, the notification dot with the number of calls you missed or the number of messages you have doesn't go away unless you actually read the message. Also, it asks you to set up a PIN code, which has to be 6 digits. However, when you enter 4 digits, you can press the next button. However, it will yell at you that you need 6 digits. And some other minor things like that. Not a big of an issue, but still a little bit annoying. Or when you connect this device to your computer, it immediately enters the MTP file transfer mode. So that means that you don't need to actually confirm that you want to connect in that mode. And the only thing protecting your storage from access is the PIN code that the device asks when it detects USB connection. I think this is a little bit of a security issue, but still it does ask for a PIN code before exposing the storage to the computer. And now the most interesting part, the use case, which is dictated by the screen technology. Since other than the e-ink screen, everything else about this smartphone is mediocre at best. It's your very, very basic smartphone. Features and spec-wise, I mean. The two selling points of an e-ink screen is first, it doesn't use power to display the image. Once the image is formed, it is visible in the ambient light. This device does have a front light, but that can be disabled and you can use it without the inbuilt light. This makes it very easy on the eyes. It is much more comfortable for eyes compared to your normal screen. Unfortunately, the e-ink technology, even though it does improve, it improves at glacier pace. All the problems that existed with the very first e-ink screens are still more or less present even in the most up-to-date revisions. For example, this screen still needs to be refreshed from time to time to get rid of the ghosting. That is the remains of the previous image displayed. The colors are not vibrant at all. Even though the colors are present, it is a far cry from a color display or a colored printed paper. The colors here are very, very bland, and they look more like e-pencil than e-ink. So basically the colors are there, but they are not great. And another problem is screen refresh. Even though Bigme has some technologies built in to make screen refresh as fast as possible, you will get about 20 to 25 Hz on average, and you will still have a lot of ghosting. That means that you cannot even watch video on this device. Well, you can do it, but it will not be an enjoyable experience. So my use case is a work phone. At my main job, I mostly work with documents. So the applications I use on the phone for work is email client. I read lots of emails, so this is text, and e-ink is good for reading text. I also read lots of chats in WhatsApp Business, in MS Teams, and other types of enterprise-grade communication software, which is again text, and e-ink screens are very good for reading text. Occasionally I open some documents, for example, Excel tables, Word documents, PDF documents, which are again text, and e-ink is perfect for reading text. And I also used two authenticator software to access VPN to my work and to authenticate into work applications, and that could be run on any screen, since the only thing it does, it just displays you an OTP code. I also use Softphone, so basically this is my desk phone, but as an app in my smartphone, and you don't actually need a screen for that at all. So for me, this device is perfect as a work phone since I read a lot. And that includes reading business books and business news. And if you are into reading books, you can also use this smartphone as a small 5.8-inch ebook, and since it runs Android, you can have all your ebook apps, including Kindle, on a single device that fits into your pocket. And since it also doubles as your phone, and you usually don't leave your house without your phone, unlike an e-reader, which usually requires effort to be taken together with your smartphone. That means that most of the time your e-reader will be with you whenever you need it. The only thing that really let me down is the lack of dual SIM support. I really need 2 SIM cards for my work, and since this phone doesn't have it, I'm not completely satisfied with it. But if Bigme will release the Hibreak Pro version soon, and it will have the dual SIM support, I will upgrade from this model to that model, mostly because of the dual SIM capability. So basically, this is a love or hate device. It definitely doesn't replace your main phone, but this is not an issue for me since I already carry 2 smartphones. One is my personal one, and the second one is a work one. I know you can combine work and personal workspaces or profiles on a single device in recent Android versions. However, I personally prefer 2 separate devices so I can separate my personal life from my work life. And I really like this device. One of the best features is the standby mode. As I already said, the e-ink screens do not use power to display an image. They only use power to form the image or to change the image. And on this device, you can have different standby screens. They are called screensavers. So basically, the screen goes dim if you have backlight enabled. It becomes black and white. One of the screensavers is your calendar, notifications, clock, and that kind of information. And you can also change from light theme to dark theme, and white text on a black background looks fantastic on an e-ink screen. And you can also invert colors of the entire interface, so instead of having black text on white background, you will have white text on black background. However, in this case, you almost lose all color. And that is how I use it most of the time. Moreover, in the settings, you can select how often the screen will refresh. For example, if you select 5 minutes, it will refresh 12 times each hour. However, if you choose 1 minute, it will refresh every minute. That means 60 times each hour. And this is how I have mine set up. So it refreshes every minute. Obviously, this mode drains battery faster. That's why, in my case, one charge lasts only about 2, maybe 3 days. If you don't use this feature, for you, the charge can last longer. So basically, that's it. Some people find it difficult to like this device. I don't find it difficult at all. I enjoy using it. I'm looking forward for the Pro version, but if you don't need the dual SIM and you just want a black and white or a color e-ink Android phone, follow the link in the description to purchase one.
I am the god of YouTube!
Like, subscribe, jingle bells.